Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
This is Roger Drummer, and today we will be talking about the Shen of dieting. So what could possibly be the Shen of dieting? Well, Shen roughly translates as spirit. So eating for spirit is kind of what the show today is about. But to lay the groundwork for that, I'm going to be talking about a lot of diets, a lot of things going on in the diet world, so to speak. So today we're going to be talking a lot about food tribes, groups of people that get together to diet a certain way. We're going to be talking about obesity, clean eating, and spiritual eating. What are the traditions of spiritual eating? Now, I have a big investment in dieting myself. I'm someone who, when I was 19 years old, weighed almost 270 pounds, went on a diet and lost 125 pounds in about 5 months. And so I know a little bit about dieting, and I have to admit, when I did that, I knew absolutely nothing about health. I knew nothing about the proper way to diet. I basically just winged the whole experience. But it worked. I lost all that weight. I have managed to keep most of it off. I did gain a good 25 pounds back because, believe me, at 6'2", 142 pounds was just a little too little, let's say. And so I gained some weight back, but I have stayed within a range of maybe 6 or 7 pounds for the last 43 years. So my weight doesn't vary a lot. I'm one of those people now, and this will make a lot of people angry that listens to this. I am one of those people that has a bathroom scale, and I use that bathroom scale to make sure that I don't lose too many pounds. And so I'm getting on the scale to make sure I didn't lose 3 or 4 pounds. And if I did, I have to eat more in the next 3 or 4 days because I want to maintain a certain weight. For some reason, I might skip meals. I might be working out a little more. I just might be too busy, but I'll end up just shedding pounds really quickly. And so I have to watch it to make sure I keep my body weight on. I'm also one of those people that if I quit going to the gym and stop lifting weights, I'll lose 5 pounds in the first week. Now, that also drives people nuts, and it doesn't make much sense to most people, but I will actually lose weight when I stop working out. And so, very interesting, my metabolism. But, I put on a little bit of muscle weight when I start lifting weights, and I maintain that. And when I stop, I just kind of start to melt away. Could be the fact that I'm in my 60s, and, people in their 60s don't maintain muscle mass that great. And also, because I eat kind of a yogi diet, I am a pescatarian, meaning I'm a vegetarian, kinda, that eats fish. And so my one animal product besides eggs basically is fish. I do eat a little bit of dairy, but I'm not a yogurt eater, milk drinker. I like cheese as a flavoring. And so, that's my diet. And in my own personal experience is that particular diet for me isn't the best for maintaining muscle mass or growing big. But luckily that's not something that I really am putting a lot of energy into anyway. I'm more about health maintenance and about the Shen of dieting, and this is why I'm talking about it today. I started out losing a whole bunch of weight, and then I became a vegetarian. And why or what prompted my voyage into vegetarianism? Well, it was actually reading a book about running. And I was beginning to be a runner at that time, and I read the book by Jim Fixx called The Book of Running. And so in that book, he described having vegetarian friends who could eat an entire meal and 2 hours later be running 10 miles out like nothing had happened. And he couldn't do that because his food, he was a meat eater, sat in his stomach too long, and it made him very uncomfortable when he ran. So that's why I tried it. And I got into being a vegetarian. And then as my life progressed and as my running progressed, I became someone who still stayed on that diet because it started to fit into the spiritual practices that I was learning. And so later on in the show, I'll be getting into a little bit about why diet might make a difference to a spiritual practice and why that is really the norm for different monasteries, groups of monks, different religions avoid certain foods, all those different things. But today, right now, I want to first talk about food tribes. And the reason I want to talk about food tribes is that it is getting to be such a big issue in diet. And I know this in particular because I still do some consultations for people for their herbal programs, trying to adjust their health and find out things. And one of the things you always have to kind of circumvent or work around is someone's particular diet. Now, a lot of times you'll talk to people who never have invested any energy into thinking about their diet. They basically just eat what they started eating when they were teenagers and they first got a hold of some money on their own. And they have fallen into this diet, which is mostly junk food and fast food and standard American diet. But there's a segment, and it's getting bigger all the time, of people that have a particular diet. And this is why it's called food tribes, because it's like they belong to a group that is very rigid about everything that they do. And they fall into quite a few different categories. So you have to be able to work within that category. And if that category is really the one thing that you think is disrupting their health, you have to tell them, but it's really hard to get somebody to change their diet. And there's a reason for that. And I've been through this process too. The reason is that diet might have made you feel really good for a short period of time, or maybe even 6 months. You might feel really great on that diet, and then all of a sudden one day you don't. But in your mind, it's the greatest thing in the world. And so to try and change your health, you never think of changing your diet again, because why would you? That diet made you feel so fantastic. But the reality is maybe it was too radical. Maybe it just was good for a short period of time to deal with some imbalances you had, and you need to adopt a less radical form of diet, or you need to make a big shift. And that's really hard to do because, again, in most people's minds, that would be saying, I made a mistake. And in reality, so what do? And I've been through this, believe me. What do? They just keep thinking there's something wrong with them. And part of that whole process is we're all programmed that way. We watch pharmaceutical ads, we listen to ads about doctors, we read magazines, and basically Western medicine tells you that you're defective. And you have to find your defect, and usually you can find a drug that fixes that defect. And so your mind just naturally rolls down to the idea that you're defective, and it can't be your diet. It has to be the defect that you haven't figured out. I went through this process with my chronic fatigue, thinking that I had some viral thing that my body couldn't handle. My immune system was messed up. All these different things were happening to me, when in reality, I was just highly stressed out, wore out my body, and it could no longer make energy out of the food that I was eating. And once I started putting some energy back in and got away from just taking antiviral herbs and medicinal things and started taking food-grade herbs, tonics, the type of herbs I formulate now with all my products at HerbWorks. When I started taking those types of herbs, I put energy back into my system, and then my body started to work differently. Its level of vitality kicked in one day after a few weeks, and all of a sudden I just started this process of digging myself out of the hole, which was chronic fatigue. And so today, I want to talk a little bit to start out with about food tribes. And food tribes means you're part of a group that has decided that a particular regimen of eating is perfect for you and you're going to stick to it no matter what. And so you belong to this large group. And right now in America, believe it or not, 36% of the people in this country belong to a food tribe. They are latched into a particular type of diet. And what's very interesting about this is that the diet is no longer just considered to be something to help you lose weight. 10 years ago when people said they were dieting, it was because they were all trying to lose weight. And that's not a bad thing in this country. Think about the fact that 37% of the people in this country, adults, are obese. That's pretty frightening, 37%. If you kind of do the math on that, it'll frighten you, But the reality is that, so dieting to lose weight is not a bad idea, but it depends on how you actually go about it. There's so many fad diets. There's so many things that you can get into that will help you to lose weight. And believe me, they all work. The reality is, though, is that you can't maintain them. You can't stay on a diet that's so radical and so low in calories that is going to force you into losing weight for a month. And then what happens after that? Once you get tired of it, you're kind of done because you're going to gain all your weight back. I'm one of those people who could never figure out how anyone could go on a diet that was based on frozen dinners from a company. And frozen dinners was what you were going to look forward to 3 times a day to eat. I mean, how soon would you get tired of that? And, how long would you be able to maintain that particular diet? The reality is that if you're on any kind of diet, you have to learn about food. You have to learn how to cook. Cooking food is not that hard, and it can become an art to where you're actually really good at it. And you're one of those people, I get this all the time, people are amazed at some of the food I make, and I really don't make anything that's difficult to make. I'm one of those people that has mastered really easy foods to make, and then I serve them to people. But I think part of the thing that amazes people so much is that I'm actually someone who cooks. And that's getting to be such a rarity in life today. But that's what keeps me grounded in my own health, is my shopping for food, my cooking for food, eating nutritious food. And really that should be the core issue around all foods, no matter what tribe you actually belong to. So in the article I was reading on the Washington Post, they were talking about how 36% of the country is now locked into a particular type of eating. And they went through and listed in what they called the ascending order of popularity. And this whole order just cracked me up because listen to this. It had intermittent fasting, the paleo diet, gluten-free diet, low carb, Mediterranean diet, the whole 30 diet, the high protein, the vegetarian, the vegan, the cleansing diet, the DASH, the keto diet, the high fat diet. And what's really fascinating about that article is half of those are not diets. They're actually trends or just things that you do in a particular diet. In fact, like intermittent fasting isn't a diet in and of itself. It's a period by which you don't eat to allow your body to go through a phase by which it cleans itself up. In fact, if you're not familiar with intermittent fasting, it's basically deciding that you're going to have an 8-hour window. For some people, it's even more strict, could be 6 hours, by which you then eat all your food for the entire day within that window. Now, that might seem a really odd thing to do, but it's been proven through countless studies that promotes longevity. In every animal study they've ever done, the animals live longer, they're all healthier, and you think, well, how does that actually kind of work? It's not that hard, believe me. I do it, and if I do it all the time, it's not that hard. So intermittent fasting basically means you set a time. Let's say in my case in particular, I might set a time between 11 and 6. And between 11 and 6 every day, I eat food. And after 6 o'clock, I'm done. Most of the time, I stick to that. In fact, for a year and a half, I was very strict with that. Now, maybe 4 days out of the week, I'm really strict with that. I might have a snack on the other 3 because I've relaxed my diet on the weekends. I'm hanging out with the family, I'm doing things. But the reality is an intermittent fast, I'm done eating by 6 p.m. I don't eat again until about 11 the next day. Now, why would that be beneficial to your system? Because you have this built-in part of you called autophagy, by which your body, when it has a break from food, and this break has to be a minimum of 12 hours, when you have a break from food, your body goes into a process by which it searches out damaged old cells and recycles them. And then you just pass it out of your system. You get up in the morning, it's been probably 12 hours since you've eaten anyway, as soon as you wake up. It's not that hard to do. You drink a couple glasses of water, it kind of moves that system along, and your body starts to break down and move things out. This was part of my program when I had cancer, and when I got rid of my cancer using the ketogenic diet, was this system of autophagy. I did it every single day. So my body was just naturally working on getting rid of cancer cells. Cancer cells are diseased, damaged cells. And so the body, I was really just harnessing my body's natural ability to get rid of things that aren't supposed to be there. And then I added herbs to that program, meditation to that program. But a big part of it was intermittent fasting. And since I mentioned ketogenics with my intermittent fasting, but you can do it with any diet. I then ate a high-fat diet, which did not supply my cancer with sugar. And in that process, the cancer becomes weaker and more damaged. And so it was easier for my body to go through the other process to clear it out. So it was fascinating to me that I could harness a natural thing going on in my body to help me get rid of something that I did not want to be there. And so that's what I did.
This podcast is brought to you by Herbworks, specializing in stress and brain essentials. Check out Roger's other articles and videos at herbworks.com. While you're there, take a look at our natural herbal-based product line for energy, stress, immunity, and sleep. Now back to Roger.
Now, they mentioned the paleo diet. You can do intermittent fasting with paleo. And paleo is one of the more popular diets. And if I was going to tell anybody, if I was just generally going to talk to someone about what they should do to go on a new diet, I can honestly say I would either tell them to do paleo or I would tell them to do Mediterranean. And paleo would probably be my first take for most of the people I talk to. And the reason for that is that the paleo diet is really just a clean food, natural food diet. They talk about how it's how your ancestors ate, and that's probably true because we didn't have access to grains and all these different things. So the paleo diet is almost grain-free, although there's some versions of it now that allow you to eat quinoa and different things. But it's pretty much a gluten-free, grain-free diet based on animal proteins and getting a high level of nutrients and a lot of vegetables and different fruits that are low glycemic. So it's a very healthy diet. And for most people, especially people transitioning from a diet where they just eat about anything they want, and which includes fast food, the paleo is just an unbelievably nutritious diet that I don't find very hard to stick to. And so one of the false things about paleo is that a lot of people that get into it, because they don't research things, because, most people just don't. And so they assume that I'm going to go on a paleo diet because it lets me eat all the animals I want. I can eat steak and big plates of meat, and really that's not what paleo is about. Paleo is centered around using animal products, but only using healthy ones. They're using wild fish. They're taking grass-fed beef, wild game, but they're eating moderate amounts of it. And the meal, again, is centered around other foods that are vegetable by nature. And so they see the importance of all this nutritious food, and they have animal products as part of it. But it's not about sitting down to 2 pounds of steak and, just having a little salad on the side. That's not how it works. And so the paleo can be very, very healthy for almost anybody that gets into it, and not that easy, not that hard to actually stick to. Now, gluten-free is not a diet in and of itself, but if you're just going on a diet and your only thing that you're thinking about is gluten-free, you're probably not eating a healthy diet. Because if you just take your junk food diet or your standard American diet and remove the wheat from it, really you're still stuck with a diet that doesn't have much nutritious food in it. Now, gluten-free can be part of paleo. It can be used with your intermittent fasting. It can be part of any of these other diets that I talk about. In fact, I've been gluten-free for 9 years, and it was part of my ketogenic diet, but I didn't start it because of the ketogenic diet. I had already been doing that for 7 years. I found it to be amazing in the fact that I got rid of joint pain and inflammation in my body, but that's because I was slightly allergic to it. And so by removing it, my body then dealt with inflammation and all my joint pain went away. So that was a great thing for me. But it can be part of any of these diets. But if you make the mistake of just thinking, I'm now going to eat a lot of cookies and a lot of breads and a lot of packaged foods and cakes and different things that are all just made with a different type of flour, you haven't done much to improve your health. You might have taken the one thing out that might be an allergen, like the gluten in wheat, but basically you're on a high glycemic diet that'll raise your blood sugar and probably set you up for other diseases. Now, that doesn't mean having a gluten-free snack once in a while is terrible for you, but the reality is most people, if they're not making that connection between health and gluten-free and the products that are offered out on the market, they really just end up replacing one bad thing with another bad thing. And so their blood sugar's still too high. They're susceptible to getting diabetes and high blood pressure. Nothing has really changed, except that now you can claim that you're part of a club that doesn't eat gluten. And so that kind of snowballs right into low carb and Mediterranean and Whole30. In fact, if you're not familiar with Mediterranean, then I'm really shocked, I have to say, because that's the most common diet and probably the easiest one to follow because it's based on fish, small amounts of meat, whole grain when you eat grain products, lots of vegetables, olive oil, fruits, local fruits, things like that. It's not a hard diet to stick to. In fact, it's very flavorful. It's very satisfying and has amazing health benefits. I mean, it's just one of those things where they just keep rolling out information on how it impacts your health. And it's also one of the diets that highlighted how amazing olive oil consumption is for you. In fact, I was listening to someone give a lecture the other day, and they said the heart health benefits of the Mediterranean diet took a unbelievable leap in how effective it was when you increased your olive oil consumption to a liter per week. And, you know, I'm a big olive oil user, but boy, I don't come close to a liter a week. I might do a half liter, and I'm pretty good at that. But the reality is, man, that's a lot of olive oil. But it kind of changes your idea about how fats affect your diet, how all these things affect your health. That was supposed to be the big leap in how that diet became even more effective of dealing with cardiovascular issues. And so, again, all these things are kind of lumped together. Has anybody heard of the Whole30 diet? I was just made aware of this not too long ago. And when you look at it, I really start laughing because, you know, I'm someone that researches diets, and it's not like I forget about one diet because I read about a new one. And I'm also someone that realizes almost all these categories are talking about the same thing, except they put a new name on it. And the Whole30 diet, oh, that's amazing. It's completely grain-free. It's based on lean, clean protein like grass-fed beef, wild fish, you know, getting rid of dairy, getting rid of, you know, fast food, getting rid of fried food, all these different things. And when you look at it, man, it's really clean. It's a great transitional diet. And this is how it was set up. It's set up to be a diet. If you have a multiple layers of health issues and you can't figure them out, the very best thing you can do is radically change your diet. And that's what the Whole30 is about. You switch to a Whole30 diet and you find out that you're restricting your food to just clean food, organic food, and like I said, the proteins and a little bit of beneficial fats. And your body then is able to regroup and balance itself, and you start to find out that maybe half of your problems were just caused by what you're eating. But the reality is when you read the Whole30, you realize it's a paleo diet. It's not much different than that. It's just a version of something that was already out there. And so then we get into kind of what our talk today is about. And that is the eating for your spirit. And that's where more of these vegetarian, vegan diets come from. In fact, there's never been really large groups of people all over the world that followed strict vegan diets, or, there's been larger groups that followed vegetarian, but the vegan is just even a more strict form of that, where they're not consuming any animal products. And that diet, in my opinion, because I talk to people with health issues, is the hardest one to correct people's nutritional deficiencies on, because it doesn't supply enough of basic things that you need for your health. And I could do a different podcast on that completely. But the reality is the vegan diet is missing things. And the hard thing about telling someone that their diet's missing things and it might be related to their health issues, because everyone will tell you, but I feel great on it. Well, that's true. But, it might take you 10 years of not having certain nutrients for it to show up as a major health issue. And that's the problem with it. You don't want to wait till you're 50 or 60 to find out that your brain's drying up because you didn't feed it anything. And so anyway, all these diets, which they consider to be the tribe that people belong to, make up about 36% of all Americans. And the interesting thing about it to me is that if you look at all of it and you try to figure out what is the common thread in there that makes any of it work, right? There's two common threads that kind of run through the whole thing. One is low carb. And by low carb, it usually turns out to be very little grains and not what a lot of people think right away is, well, I can't eat vegetables. No, it allows you to eat about all the vegetables you want. But vegetables by nature are mostly low glycemic carbs and they don't impact your blood sugar. The whole idea behind low carb is really low blood sugar. And if you can control that, you're going to control chronic disease. It's as simple as that. And so that's one of the things that runs through all these diets: low carb and clean food. So if you can do that, if you can get into a diet that's just clean food, you can pick any of these things and actually be successful with it. And long term, you'll be successful because you're concentrating on clean food. And this is the easiest thing for anybody out there that wants to diet. And it fits right into the topic that I'm actually going to be talking about now. And that is spiritual eating. Spiritual eating really is about clean eating. And clean eating is just finding foods that are organically grown, that are mostly vegetable, that's supplemented with a little bit of animal protein if you want that, or vegetarian protein, but it's mostly from a clean source that has little impact on the planet when they're making this food source. And you're not eating it in any amount that makes it hard for your body to process and changes your energetic state. And this is the whole idea, the Shen of eating, and what I got into as a vegetarian and why I stuck with it and still practice it today, because it has an effect on what is known as your spirit or the Shen part of your system. And how could that possibly be? Well, you have to start thinking about food in terms of energy. And in terms of energy, herbs, vegetables, and fruits have the lightest energy to them. They're all very cleansing. In fact, if you can think of yourself as an energy body and an energy being, which we all are, energy moves all around our system. It's a known fact, even though people have a hard time explaining it. If you think of it that way, then you also have to think about how your organs and glands are all connected to this energy system. And you think about how those particular parts of you can be assisted to run much easier and to naturally cleanse and detox themselves. And that's through a diet that's heavily based on vegetables and based on fruits. And so if you can get into a system of clean dieting, then basically you're eating a diet that's recommended to people who just start any spiritual practice. Because it's been a tradition in many monasteries all over the world and spiritual practices to transition everybody that comes to them to learn certain techniques to start cleaning up their diet. And they start this process by giving them a few months, usually, by which they're supposed to get rid of all beef and pork. And then the next phase is usually chicken and fish. And then the next phase is usually eggs, but a lot of times they allow that and they allow dairy products. Now, why does this make a difference if you're meditating or if you're praying a lot or living in a monastery? What are all the reasons actually behind that? Well, how can a certain food affect your spirit? Well, here's basically the simplest way to look at it. You're now involved in a practice every day, whether you're at home or you belong to a monastery or you belong to a spiritual group. You're now involved in a practice where every single day you sit down to get quiet and you sit down to pray or meditate. The very act of meditating changes your energy body. It taps you into universal energy and it starts to come into your system and move around your body. In fact, a lot of guided meditations are simply a way of moving this energy around your system. If you're familiar with Chinese health practices at all, you're familiar with Tai Chi. Tai Chi is a simple form of standing movement meditation where they're moving their energy and feeling it flow around their system. The advantage to that is that once you feel and know this vital energy that's moving around your system, you don't want to do anything that actually interrupts that or maybe stops the flow of that energy and how it moves. And this is what the diet is about. The diet is simply not only cleansing, but it's actually very easy to move energy when you eat like that. And it doesn't tend to cause imbalances in certain organ systems that will then block your energy. Now, block your energy. What does that mean to anyone? Well, if you're a Chinese herbalist, like I've been practicing Chinese herbology for a while, a lot of times there's a huge segment in Chinese medicine where they just realize that stress or your liver function stops the flow of energy around your body. Your liver is in charge as the field general of moving all energy around your system. And so the thing that makes your liver back up is heavy foods, oily foods, foods that are hard to process, and emotional states. Anger, frustration, all these things affect your liver. And so if you can eat a diet that actually is very beneficial to your liver, which is almost all green food, fruits, all these different things help move and cleanse your liver, then it's easier for your liver to function, and your liver is highly involved in how energy moves around your entire system. In fact, if you sit down to meditate, and this is an old Taoist principle, they have this idea that you have what's called an orbit of energy that runs from the top of your head down the front between your legs and up your back. It's like a little egg if you look at it, and your body's kind of inside this energy field, and their whole practice is moving that energy, right? Well, if you're eating things like pork, which is one of the things that disrupts or stagnates your liver more than any other food that you could eat, then you might be trying to move that energy and all of a sudden it's just stuck somewhere and it won't go anywhere. And if you're someone that's highly successful in making a lot of energy and moving it, it's not going to feel good that your energy just gets stuck. Sometimes you might just end up with an excessive amount of sexual energy or an excessive amount of shoulder and neck tension, or have a tendency to just get angry and yell at people because you have this energy that's just not moving and your body doesn't know what to do with it. And this is really the basis of what having a certain diet, if you're living in a monastery or doing a spiritual practice, is all about. And this is why the vegetarian diet became so popular in those instances, because it has the least effect of causing blockages of energy and the least effect of actually stimulating you like certain other foods. Certain meats have a stimulating effect, can have a stimulating effect on your sexual energy. All these things might not be the best diet for someone living in a monastery or someone who's sitting at home and trying to make an hour-long practice every day of praying and meditating. So that's how that diet became associated with monasteries, with monks, with people on a spiritual path. And that's kind of why people that tend to be on those diets, even though they get into it and don't think about it, end up on a spiritual path at some time because they're just more sensitive to energy and feeling things. Doesn't mean you have to do that to be on that path or anything else, but it just is one of those things that raises the probability that you'll either be successful or maybe get into one of those things. And it kind of fits in with the old yogic tradition. Yoga's becoming really popular these days. And if you look at what the basic principles of yoga are centered around, they're centered around this guy named Patanjali who wrote this book on Yoga Sutras. And part of the principles of yoga is one called ahimsa. And ahimsa, I think is pronounced. Ahimsa is basically avoidance of all violence, avoidance of harming anything. And so that fits right in with the yogic diet, which is mostly vegetarian. You're doing as little harm as you possibly can to anything else on the planet to feed yourself and keep you in good health and to do your practice. So that kind of a diet just naturally fits into yoga and different practices. Now, when I first got into dieting, after I lost all my weight, I discovered something called Fit for Life. And boy, Fit for Life is based on the idea of eating a lot of fruit. In fact, before noon, you only want to eat fruit up until noon every day. And so I was eating 12 pieces of fruit by noon every day because I worked early in the day. And it was good for a period of time. I felt good on it. I lost, it kept my weight down. I seemed to detox my whole system and all these things. But then you know what? It's really too much high sugar for me. But again, I was kind of addicted to it because I'd been on it for a while. In fact, I had a relative that lost 100 pounds on that diet. And the same thing happened to him. We both became really cold. We lost our energy and we were addicted to it and couldn't move on to the next phase, which would have been a more balanced diet. But that diet kind of fits right in with yogic principles, right in with the vegetarian diet, all these different things. But for me, it's always now something I look back on and realize, you know what, that diet became addicting and I wasn't able to transition into the next diet. And this is the thing that everybody listening has to realize about any diet they get into, is that dieting is really about making you feel the best that you can possibly feel. If you're no longer feeling that good and you can't figure it out, change your diet. This is why when I ended up with cancer, I was a strict vegetarian. And most healers will tell you never eat animal products, never eat protein when you have cancer because of the energetic, it's not the pure energy, all these different things. And I took that into account. But after about 30 days, you know what? One day I just felt like, man, I need some oomph. I need something. So I ate some fish. And boy, did I feel great. I just felt so fantastic. And I continued to eat fish about 4 times a week while I had cancer. And once I got rid of it, now I'm just in the habit of eating it 3-4 times a week. I love it. It makes me feel good. But luckily for me, I was able to not look at all the dogma around diet and just decide, hey, this makes me feel really good. I need to feel good. I'm involved in a heavy process here. I just need to feel good. And so I was eating tons of nutritious food. And so I didn't think there was any negative effects that were going to happen from it. And I must have been right because I got rid of my cancer. But here's the thing I want to talk about with eating certain foods and the stigma around eating meat, the stigma around eating fish if you're a vegetarian, and for vegans even the stigma around having butter or even yogurt or anything like that. The reality is that all those foods can be safely ate without doing much damage to your body physically as nutrition or even energetically, depending on how you actually consume them and what is the quality of it. You'd be surprised, growing up in America, like most people that will listen to this, how little information is actually out there that shows or proves that meat is a terrible food for you. Now, energetically, anybody that meditates a lot just doesn't eat meat because it doesn't fit with their program. But if you're looking at it just from a purely nutritious standpoint and how it's going to affect your health, there's really not much information that proves the dogma out there that meat's terrible for you. I know this is shocking to most people, but there's been studies done that show you could probably eat bacon for breakfast every day of your life and only increase your chances of getting cancer by about 3%. Is that a lot? And they don't know that 3% is actually related just to the bacon, or the fact that you might be the guy who sits on the couch all day, watches 8 hours of television, drinks 4 soda pops, smokes, and does all these other things, eats French fries 3 times a day. They don't have a study that's completely independent of that. So the reality is, and you keep this in context. You're talking about a guy who's a vegetarian for 30 years, right? So it's not like, I'm pushing meat on anybody. But what I'm saying is, if you have to make a choice to eat it and you really like it, then what is going to determine how it affects your system is often not the thing itself. It's how good a quality you buy. This is why there's the grass-fed beef movement. It's how much you consume at one time and what else you actually consume in your diet. I tell this to people that ask me all the time, can I have a steak once in a while? I say, yeah, enjoy it. Buy a great one. Have a big salad with it. Steam some vegetables. The next day, eat a lot more vegetables. Anything that moves it through your system a little bit. I think most of the negative effects of it might be that if you're one of those people who doesn't have a good bowel transit time, that it might stay in your body for 3 days. You don't want to do that with anything that you eat. And so, but if you look at it that way, and you're combining it with clean food, I don't think it's a big deal, especially if you're not someone who meditates every day and is trying to do something along the lines of moving energy anyway, which basically is not that many people in the world, right? So I've even known people that eat it once a month because of the way it changes the way they feel. In fact, when I had chronic fatigue, one of the things I did, I went and saw this very famous herbalist acupuncturist, and he said something to me that made perfect sense. And I've never forgotten it. He said to me, Roger, you eat like a monk. You eat like someone who's supposed to be sitting in a cave and never really doing anything else but praying and meditating. But you're trying to live the life of a warrior. You're out in the physical world doing a lot of physical things and trying to get things done. And your diet just doesn't match up with who you're trying to be. And that was something that was really fascinating to me and really caused me to think. In fact, he suggested that I have some beef to help with my chronic fatigue. And so I tried it 3 times in 1 week. And I have to tell you, I felt a big surge of energy when I did that. Now, I only did it for a week. I think it really bumped my energy up a bit and helped me to climb out of my chronic fatigue. It was just like sparking a little bit of the battery in my system, along with the herbs that I was taking and all these things. But the good thing was that I actually made the mental leap to try something, right? I wasn't just completely stuck in the dogma of my diet that I was doing. And it was, for me, a signal that I was willing to do something to heal my physical body. And you have to be able to do that. But again, for a lot of people, the problems we have with things like meat, the problem we have with even buying fish, is that we often buy very low grade qualities of it. It might be factory farmed or even factory farmed out of the ocean. And all these things are not clean. They don't have basic nutrition to them, and they have a negative effect on your physical health. So if you're someone who likes those products, find clean stuff. This is probably the greatest concept you could ever figure out about any diet you're going to go on. Eat clean food, organic food that's not sprayed with pesticides, food that is grown in a soil that they're taking care of. Most mass market foods are not grown in a soil that they do anything for, other than to put a couple chemicals in it to make the color they want in the vegetable that you're actually buying. And so it's a big difference in food. If you eat clean, you don't really have to belong to any of these tribes. You can belong to the Eat Clean tribe, where you're just putting real food into your body and having a beneficial effect from it. But the Shen of eating, and this kind of falls right in with the Shen or the spirit of eating, is that this is a concept that's not just something that we're talking about today. This is a concept that's even in the Bible, to avoid gluttony, to eat things that are clean. In the Bible, they talk about not eating certain animals because of its effect in your system. There's a lot of spiritual groups, religions that still practice this idea of not eating pork. And you wonder about that, but the reality is pork has the worst, most dense energy as far as your own energy field and the movement of energy around your body. And I would have to think thousands of years ago, when they came up with the idea not to eat pork, it was because of that. Because almost all these energetic principles that I ever talk about are things that have been around for thousands of years. And they came up when people were probably much more sensitive to things and weren't distracted by the internet and 7-Eleven and all these other aspects of life that didn't allow them to get into feeling their own energy, get into having a spiritual practice every day. Life was different 3,000 years ago. And so these things still make sense today. If you want to get into the Shen or the spirit of eating, then you want to eat clean food. You want to eat as little animal product as you want, just enough to make you feel vital and alive, and supplement that with other food. This fits right in with taking herbs for your health. I have to share something with you. I honestly think the reason I had such an amazing experience taking Chinese herbs when I discovered them, I had experiences of my heart really opening up. I had amazing dreams. I had examples of just feeling and seeing energy. I had all these amazing things happen to me that really catapulted me into wanting to investigate Chinese herbs. I don't think that many of those things would have happened to me if I hadn't been a vegetarian for about 10 years leading up to that. I had become sensitive to energy and sensitive to the things around me that I don't think would have happened if I was still eating my standard Midwestern potatoes and gravy and meat diet, which I grew up on. And so I think that diet prepared me for the experiences that I had later, which then changed my life and catapulted me into being an herbalist and doing what I do today. In fact, I'm always reminded, you know how it's kind of funny in life, certain people say things to you and you never forget them, even though you don't remember who that person was. I had somebody in Hawaii when I was living there a few weeks before I got hit by a truck and ended up being in a wheelchair for a few weeks. But he told me something very fascinating one day, and I've never forgotten. And I think this is true. I really think the guy was onto something. He had been a vegetarian for 3 or 4 months, and he went back to eating, but he was eating a cleaner diet. He added some animal products. He said he thought that he really felt that everybody in the world would benefit from becoming a vegetarian for about a month. He goes, maybe 2 months. He goes, because there's just something about it that clears your mind and helps you to see life differently. And you discover, and this happened to me, you discover there's 50 or 60 foods in the grocery store you've never even heard of, because all you do is buy meat and have something to go along with it, right? You discover all these other foods, you feel lighter, your brain changes, you think differently. He goes, but then after a while, you need to add some meat back in to give you the oomph to get through life. He goes, because life is hard, you need some physical energy. And I looked at him when he said it to me. I thought, well, that was fascinating. But as the years go by, I really see there was a lot of wisdom in that statement, is that sometimes we have to go through a process, and usually it involves your diet. And a lot of times, if you're belonging to one of these tribes, you don't even know it, but you're in the process, right? You're in the process of changing your energy body and changing your physical body. You don't realize it when you grab a diet like this. You think, I'm just going to lose some weight, or I'm going to just eat a little healthier. No, you've actually started the process of transformation. You're putting yourself in a position to have an experience. And this is what he was talking about. That vegetarian diet lightened up his body, lightened up his mind to where he had an experience that things were different and that he could live life a little differently. And then he decided he needed some meat. He needed something heavy to give him the power to go out in the world and do something. And I look back on that today and I think, that was a really amazing thing he told me. I still have no idea who that guy was. I think he was dating the woman that I rented a room off of in Hawaii. But it was quite a piece of wisdom that he passed on to me. And I think about this today because I know that happened when I was going through my cancer process. I needed some oomph. I was eating a lot of clean things. I was doing everything right. And I just needed a little more oomph. My body was lacking something, right? So keep that in mind today if you're a vegetarian, or if you're a vegan, or if you're just eating one of these diets that doesn't allow you to eat certain foods. Sometime you might actually need it, and you might actually need it to move you forward in life, to be able to do the things that you need to do to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish. So don't get locked into a diet. Kind of look at the spirit of everything that you're doing. Why am I eating this way? What effect does it have on my physical body? What effect does it have on the way I see the world? My Shen aspect of life? How does it impact every level of my being? And get a diet that you can exist on, but not become your dharma, so to speak. Something that, or your dogma might be a better word, but something that makes you thrive, because that's really what eating is all about. Eating is about feeling the best that you can possibly feel and getting things done, finding out what your path is in life and having the energy and vitality to go out and do that. This is why I love food. This is why I love adjusting my diet, why I love adding herbs to it like I do, why I became an herbalist. It's why I do everything I do at HerbWorks, because I want to help people feel differently and feel like they can make a change to move forward in life, to transform how they see the world and feel better about it and have the energy and power to go out there and do things. So that's it for today. This is Roger Drummer saying goodbye. Thanks for tuning in to the HerbWorks podcast. And if you want more information, go to herbworks.com.